podcast. We've got a fun guest for you guys today. Chad Maxwell is the SVP of Product and Growth for KSM. He is an advertising and media executive with deep experience in growth, partnerships, and revenue strategy, shaped by his time at KSM, where he's worked closely with brands and agencies to drive performance across digital media channels. Known for his ability to align strategy, execution, and relationships, Chad brings a pragmatic, results-focused approach to scaling media programs and solving complex advertising challenges. Chad, thanks so much for coming on, man. I know we've been trying to get this one in the books for a minute.
This is a great way to start off the year. I appreciate you having me, Dylan.
Yeah, let's go. So, hey, I love to kick people off with a little bit of a origin story. We have some, younger viewers who send and comment questions often about how to break into the advertising industry. So I feel like there's always some value in understanding how people arrive to the industry. So why don't you start off with a little bit about, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And how did you get into advertising?
Yeah, I love this question. I've heard it on the show before, and it's funny how people fall into it. Part of the intro, I'm actually president of KSM now, which is...
Oh, excuse me. I must...
No, it's all right. When you look back at the narrative and you got me thinking about how I got into this, I went to school. I was, in Central Illinois. I was born and raised in Central Illinois and carry that as part of kind of our agency heritage. We like to say kind of Midwest tenacious. I started in music, Dylan. And
wow, no way. Like in a band or like in the executive side?
No, I wish. No, I neither. Kind of like more in a symphony. The funny thing is I played tuba. I look nothing like a tuba player. And managed to go to school for that kind of Oompa Loompa skill I brought to the table. And then moved into anthropology, which was cool because I liked anthro. It used all parts of my brain in terms of understanding people, culture, systems, past and present. And after finishing that, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know what's next. I was doing some multicultural marketing at State Farm at the time. So I had dipped my toe in the water, but then went to grad school at Florida and became a methodologist for social sciences and analytics and research. And around that time, I was in grad school. I was like, man, I don't know how I feel about writing this PhD thing. I feel like I probably need more skills. And I applied for a role at Razorfish, and they flew me up to New York. And I mean, this was the time, this was 2004. .com was huge. I'm from Central Illinois. I'm in Manhattan. I have arrived.
Let's go.
And I bombed the interview. It was awful. It was not my best. And I called the recruiter and I said, hey, it wasn't my best today. I'm going to hang out at this bar across the street. If you or the interview team want to talk more, come swing by. And I sat at that bar for probably 2.5 hours, far longer than I probably should have. No one came. So I flew back to Florida and I was like, all right, well, that was still a great experience. And the recruiter called like a week and a half later and they're like, we'd love you to come up and do user research with us as part of kind of our UX team. And I was like, why would I have to say, I'm not expecting this. And I said, I sat at that bar for a long time. No one came. She goes, oh, I know. I saw you from the window. The team did. And she goes, anybody who has that self-awareness and kind of that courage to invite and see nothing left to lose, we went on the team. And that's how I landed Razorfish in New York.
Oh my gosh, what a great story.
Before Publicis bought it. Bob Lord was president at the time.
Yeah. Bob's a fraternity brother of mine. I know him. He's running things at Horizon now, right?
Yeah, doing a great job watching him in the field. But yeah, I was originally under his tutelage out of the New York office. And I did that for a while, and it was fantastic. Condé Nast was a client. I learned the ins and out of all user-centered, consumer-centered research and insights, developed and had great research projects like, do I want to pay my bills online for Capital One back in the day? Did that for a while, and then came up and opened a practice in Chicago as part of Razorfish Chicago, and fused user research with analytics. Moved over to Starcom to learn the paid side of the house because I was doing earned and owned with Razorfish in the central region. And at Starcom really blossomed into media and understanding comms planning, understanding insights from an account planning standpoint, that fusion of creative plus the power of media. Got to work in the Lisa Donahue years for all things data center media and Laura Desmond, Cassie Klein. Yeah. It was a great time and so thankful for my Starcom years. And I got to do new business with Starcom and was pitching a great brand at the time, and learned that I love touching all parts of the system. And I was talking to Joni Williams at Kelly Scott Madison, and they needed someone to help integrate product, to integrate vision, to integrate go-to-market, and took all those analytical research and people first skills and kind of applied that towards how do we build an agency of the future and make mid-size indies just really powerful, and been doing that since.
I love that story. I think it's maybe a little unusual for the quant side, the research side, the strategy side to ever go into new business or even care about new business, really, which I think is very unique to your background. I don't think I've ever heard someone come from that discipline. Do you think that gives you a different perspective as it pertains to, the growth roles that you were doing in the past, but also how you lead as president of the agency now? What does being a reformed quant or somebody with a quant background bring to the way that you think about the agency as a leader?
It's a great question. I think it comes to life in a couple different ways. When it comes to product and expanding and building businesses through media for our clients, I know the limits of quant, and I know where it's best applied. I know and help teams understand when your gut is speaking, that is still a data point, right? It's not about quant or qual or gut or science. It's actually, they're all data points, and how they trend together and how you listen to them based on experience, interpretation, and larger context. That's the better decision-making model for client growth. And that's something we bring to the table, is that integration. And I think as an anthropologist, right, people-centered, you understand that clients have emotions too. They have motivations. Businesses are entities and almost personas in themselves. And so you can apply to those emotional sets at the moment and understand how quant points can help guide the logic and the assurances that people need in a really chaotic marketplace, right? With talent, I think what's amazing and how I lead the agency is understanding the unique needs of the individual. Whether that's motivation, I have employees that they will really enjoy a special assignment as a privilege for a while. They just want to be at the table forming something. And others, comp is really important, etc. Others, people light up and they get energy when they're working on a new assignment versus farming and tending to a current client. And I think it helps you see the DNA of the culture of the agency and the culture of the individual much, much sharper.
Yeah, I love that anthropological, backing of how you manage. Only having managed from the sell side, not any of the other disciplines, maybe a little bit in marketing. I always tell my partner at an agency, whether it's the CEO or the president or whoever I'm reporting into, comp plan dictates behavior, so if you obviously salespeople, they're motivated by commissions, but if you structure the account team and manage their comp plan or their bonuses by tying to client retention, well, they're going to optimize to client retention. Or if you optimize, or if you base their comp plan on growth of the account, they're going to optimize to those things, and they're going to do the things within their control to optimize to that. But I love your perspective on kind of the softer parts of comp, right? Whether it's like a working mom who cares about flexibility, or people who have kind of gotten a taste of this work from home thing and they're not really willing to let it go, right? Or like you said, like there's a lot of young people who have self-diagnosed adult ADD, and they like to have the opportunity to work on a lot of different projects and touch a lot of things to keep things fresh so they don't get bored. So I think that's a smart insight in managing to the individual, but also understanding that you're trying to move in a cohesive culture and do things in unison at the same time.
Yeah, I think you couldn't be more. I mean, I feel like we've talked about all those situations with different either recruits or current team members. If people know where you're going and what's important, and you measure what matters, you have to be really careful, because when you're measuring, it does guide behavior, to your point. But how you get there and the unique either gifts that people have or the unique ways that they need to navigate a situation, it's great so long as they're putting the client first, they're driving growth, and they're delivering. It's a really different managerial skill too, because when you think about working in hybrid environments, or you're thinking about managing to outcomes, versus managing to participation, let's say, that requires different support systems and different ways of mentoring and coaching talent. And I think most talent wants independence. They want to be successful. They want pride in their work. And it's our job as leaders to foster environments, tools, and situations that allow those skills to flourish. It reminds me of parenting in some ways, not like child parent type thing, but there's that book that's about dandelion kids and orchid kids. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's great. You have some team members that are dandelions. They're going to grow no matter where you put them. And there's others that are going to bloom beautifully, but you have to find that orchid greenhouse for them to succeed. Right client, right environment. And the gifts are both great. It's our job to make sure the puzzle pieces fit together.
I love that. I want to address the product side of your old title, which I don't think I've ever seen attached to the growth term either. So, I think agencies have had to address this idea of product, right? That, when you exit an agency, really, what are you selling? You're selling your clients, you're selling your statues, you're selling your case studies, you're selling your relationships, but really you're selling people. But the modern agency is building unique IP and products as they go out and solve challenges for clients. They're also developing IP or things that can be built and then replicated and sold or scaled to other clients. How do you think about that word product as it pertains to your old title?
I think product gives marketers something to hang on to. It's really important when you're thinking about scoping, when you're thinking about unique and differentiating approaches, solutions, or capabilities, that you can hang your hat on not just a widget, but more of a truly proven out solution, an approach, a platform, something that has a moniker that you can actually rally around and put in terms of a total integrated full funnel solution to a client. That's really important because we find that when clients are looking to convert an agency, they also have something to prove to whoever's signing off on it, right? If you're not working with maybe the CMO, even the CMO may have to take some of the CEO. They could say, we're purchasing the following things, the following people, and the following skills. And most marketers, it's a nice shortcut to say, here are the types of things that we're buying. But in addition to that, that's one solve. In addition to the financial and the commercial part of it, there are clear areas that demand product solves, that are areas that are either differentiated or unresolved in the industry. Let's take even reach and frequency, that measurement in terms of walled gardens and the data diffusion on that front takes a different kind of product / solution that's marketable. So it helps you really easily identify areas that require solves that might be top of mind for the marketers. And then you instantly relate through the solution and the problem.
I love that. What's the biggest challenge for indies versus holdcos these days, in your opinion?
The biggest challenge for indies versus holdcos. Dylan, I feel like you left it open on purpose because you could go a lot of different ways. I think it is a sign of the times in terms of the variables that are at play that are affecting both entities differently. And I'll caveat to say I find there's a lot of discussion in the marketplace about this is the indies moment. And I agree. I kind of feel like it's always been the indie moment for different brands. And so it's not so much indie versus holdco. It's the marketplace conditions and the opportunities of the moment are creating different opportunities and challenges for each in different ways. Let's take scalability, right? When I think about technology and AI, it's more accessible than ever, as we all know, which means that mid-sized indies and indies in general can scale up. They can democratize technology. It's more available. Speed is a little bit easier. Integration's more accessible. And that allows you to play at a scale that is comparable to holding companies, right? Whereas with holding companies, they need to demonstrate agility and the flexibility and that speed versus just scale and clout in the marketplace a little bit differently. So to me, it's more about how the technology and the marketing consolidation is happening in the moment. I think talent is really interesting as we kind of look to the marketplace and how that's manifesting between the two. I think talent's hungry to be tethered to something that makes them a part of the collective, a part of a community, and a part of a growth trajectory that's a little bit different than just the security and stability that they may have sought in holding companies in the past. I think the illusion of stability and security in the marketplace is fading for a lot of potential employees. And that changes how they prioritize what they want to do and where they want to go. And repeatedly, we find employees are looking for growth, an opportunity to exercise decisioning and their skills in a really pragmatic and meaningful way versus being just part of a system in a larger organism.
Yeah, that's great. I think I was going to ask you, what is the indie advantage? But I think you kind of took both questions on at the same time. All right. So this wouldn't be a marketing podcast if we didn't address AI. I feel like last year was kind of the hype cycle AI, like everybody was figuring it out. Everybody was talking about it, but they didn't have as many practical solutions. I've been hearing from agency leaders a plethora of ways that AI is either making them more fast, more efficient, being able to do creative in a way that's different. From your perspective at KSM, what is the most practical application of AI and where it's delivering digital transformation to your business?
I meant to not break the AI seal first, and I did. And you ran with it, which is fair. It's a really interesting time in regards to AI because the way I think about it is two big buckets. One is efficiencies and the other one is revenue generation. And efficiencies isn't just about fewer steps. It's also about accuracy, precision, validity with data movement, campaign automation. This is very much so a little bit more that automation camp. When I think about the most practical applications, it is around QA. It is around data validity. It's porting it over, making sure that any manual data entry is one and done. And the way it moves across a campaign lifecycle is incredibly important. Things like QAing for tagging, metadata, et cetera. These are all things that automation and AI is taking care of at scale. And they're pretty rote tasks. The areas in terms of creative development are emerging. I think there's a lot of differences in terms of the output on that front still. And that's where we're being cautious around AI, which is inconsistency. So I had a conversation with a client the other day. We were negotiating a contract, Dylan. And, we took savings on the contract. And this individual mentioned to me, oh, this must be because of AI, right? That you can, drop your profit margin this way. And I said, absolutely not.
Wow.
In fact, AI is causing in some areas for us to take on more work. Why? Because it's my responsibility to make sure the output is equivalent to what we would normally expect, if not better. And so you're triangulating and parallel pathing the work so you can make sure that work is up to snuff, because the reliability of the output in some situations just simply isn't there in that same magnitude yet. It's getting there and it will, but I think part of the myth lore is that it's just wildly saving time and people resource everywhere. And it is, it's making an impact. But when we look at results and comparability, you have to be cautious because there is some hallucination. There is some inconsistency that needs to be controlled for. And I don't think we'll see all the returns from it for a long time. 3 years could be a long time in an agency.
Sure.
But it's not all the way there yet. And I do think that narrative's a little bit ahead of, especially I would say for generation, the practical application. Automation, time savings, reduction, distillation, 200%. Like those practical applications of jump starting and cliff notes, that is critical. But when you talk about create the ideal media plan that has optimal media and reach, plus accounting for these 50 stores and these 16 DMAs. Oh, don't forget the price of media and our 9 different consumer segments. It's not there.
That's interesting. What about in persona development? Do you feel like it can hoover up data and deliver personas that maybe we didn't think about before when we were using focus groups or traditional paneling?
I think so, but in a different way, right? Its ability to ingest all that focus group, that ethnographic data, the qualitative, the social listening, and to characterize that and to create an engaging persona that you could interview and see how they would react to, almost as a co-designer, a collaborator. I think that's really powerful. I think where it's going to be interesting is how synthetic audiences develop in their accuracy and validity towards predicting outcomes or emotional resonance of advertising or the effectiveness of a media plan. So far, I feel like my reading has shown that synthetic audiences aren't as predictable towards actual outcomes as real audiences and real pre-testing. I think this makes sense because when I saw those results, Dylan, I was like, well, that's kind of a bummer because I would love to shortcut with synthetic audiences, right?
Wow. Well, that is somewhat refreshing to hear because I've got people telling me every day that they're getting 95% accuracy from synthetic audiences. So I think it's good to hear a counterpoint to that. And I think, a lot of it is drinking your own Kool-Aid, I think.
Is it accuracy in what, right?
Right.
And I think what's kind of cool about that is when I think about advertising, it's still a pretty artistic space, right? Despite all the science and the data to it, and humans are naturally pretty irrational. So we like to think we can control the decisioning and we have more predictive power and assurances in what works and what doesn't than ever before. The media and marketing fundamentals, whether it's Byron Sharp or Jobs to Be Done or any of the Journal of Advertising Research, these things have validity. And media fundamentals, super sexy. But human irrationality and the context and kind of culture zeitgeist is always changing. And I think that's the important and exciting part about it, and why synthetic audiences, although take into account a ton of information, how do they take into account irrationality?
That's interesting. What about on the media buying side? It feels like more and more individual walled gardens are giving self-serve options. So there's more and more places to have to go in and have hands on keyboards. And then you've got, of course, the programmatic ecosystem. Do you feel like optimization for media buying, especially when it comes to self-serve platforms, whether it's paid social or other walled gardens like Spotify that offer a self-serve option, do you feel like the optimization piece is there, or do you still need media buyers hands on keyboards in there every 2 hours flipping switches?
I absolutely think that the optimization is making huge leaps. It's responsive. It is seeing patterns emerge quickly. It's always on, which is incredibly helpful. And so, Dylan, I think that's a fair thing to bring up. I think looking at that across platform, seeing if those optimizations align towards the larger strategic vision of the account and across audiences is really important, because otherwise you're going to end up optimizing either to your loyalty audience, lowest CPM. Like, how are you exploring and connecting with growth audiences that might require a little bit more of a nudge? You don't want them to get left behind, or over responsiveness of markets. There's boundaries you can put up for all of that, but it's a lot more than simply thinking about the optimization element. It's optimization within context. And that's that human part, I think, of AI that is critical as you think about a strategy-led future, as you think about integrated communications. How do the parts work together, not just optimizing within their individual domains?
Got it. Let's take a step back from AI and talk about brand versus performance. What's the biggest mistake that brands make when they try to plug into a performance-based outcome and a performance-based metric without evolving and thinking of their overall brand strategy or their larger culture?
When we have clients that delineate along brand and performance, we work really hard to bring those two together.
Interesting.
And the reason being is some of those channels serve double duty. Some of the overall marketing funnel, of course, is not delineated between brand and performance for the end level consumer. So when you think about people-driven communications design, you're starting more with the job to be done by the channel than if it's for brand or if it's for performance. a lot of times we fall into this trap of performance is because it can be tracked and measured quicker than brand. And this is a direct response to, I would say, kind of behavioral conditions. So when you think about kind of behavioral economics, you start to think about, sure, this marketer is getting maybe bonused on quarterly results, right? So you start to optimize and really look at that performance cycle, and you get stuck there. And you can only squeeze so much blood from a rock after a while, and that's the trap that they fall into. So if you're not feeding upper funnel somehow, and you're not thinking about a full funnel strategy, which is incredibly important, you're not building a brand for the future and something that's going to be sustainable. You're building for quarterly results. You may be building for stock earnings. You may be building just so you can hit your KPI so everyone can give themselves on a pat on the back. But there's a ton of great research, again, like how brands are built, that demonstrate that feeding that upper funnel in a variety of ways has value. It may not just be as immediately noticeable. And I think culturally, we're in this cycle of immediacy, right? Social, you're building bands, there's creators, there's influencers, and these brands turn around in such a way that you see that immediate growth, but you can plateau quickly unless you're, again, feeding the upper funnel. That's the trap.
That's interesting. So it sounds like you're saying that a lot of marketers place a premium on measurability, which also drives costs up because everybody's rushing towards the measurable outcomes or the measurable channels. Do you think that there is white space out there in channels that maybe have been less measurable? Maybe like what's left of TV, linear and traditional TV, radio. People still drive around in their cars. I mean, every once in a while, my Spotify drops when I'm in the truck and I can't get it synced, and I hit the radio button, right? And then there's billboards. Outdoor advertising is only on 5% of plans, I think, something crazy like that. And it's so ubiquitous, even outside of like the digital transformation of the outdoor space. Do you think there is white space in non-measurable or less measurable channels?
I do, and I think it's going to come back or regain relevancy a little bit with a vengeance. And here's why. One is some of those channels, especially as you think about retailers or QSR, those are great nudge channels, right? The radio still has a great role in terms of nudging people to take that turn for the drive-through, to pick up those few items at the actual brick and mortar store. There's a great role for that. Same for out of home, for example. So it definitely has variation by category. But the second thing is when we were talking about AI, I do think we're going to keep close tabs on quality. When you can generate as much AI content as you can, there's going to be a proliferation of more and more content, more and more ad creative that's easily accessible to a lot of different kind of people, which will change how ads are consumed and the receptivity to it. Ad blindness, I could see that increasing to such a degree that makes digital, although measurable, maybe a little bit murkier in terms of how it performs and how it works in conjunction with other channels. So I think there's going to be a little bit more resurgence on some of the channels, especially out of home is going to have a great day, I think, that drives real engagement, real advertising from real brands versus maybe a little bit of the skepticism that's going to emerge with digital content. And you see this all the time, right? Like just look at LinkedIn posts or how people are talking about AI content. Is this real or did AI do this? Hey, I ran this analysis. AI did it. And I'm like, well, why are you discrediting it? And it's because we're seeing a consumer insight trend of value around real. And it gets to this discussion of what does real mean? Is real, if it's made or influenced by AI, not real? But AI is real. And what they're really getting towards is what's the value judgment that needs to be placed on content or a message that's coming from a brand. And there is a value that we place on real. So engagement, like promotions and experiential, I think you'll see more real life brand support coming to fruition because there's going to be trepidation around realness and online.
Yeah, we'll think about if AI's efficiencies from a productivity perspective give us 5 hours a week back, and a lot of marketers are spending those extra 5 hours, as they should, out at conferences, meeting with clients and in the real world, instead of the digital world, that I think creates a great opportunity for brand marketers to show up more often in the real world. And, you just can't compare, seeing a digital ad or walking by a street team on the streets of Chicago and somebody hands you a drink and you take a sip of it, right? It's like, that's the measurability and impact of that impression versus the digital one can't be understated, I think. So I think you're right. I think, and then I know 17-year-olds that have completely deleted every social media app on their phone. There is a generation coming up that may be a complete technological backlash. I don't know if that's the norm, but I definitely see it popping up more in the Gen Alpha kind of circles for sure. So I think marketers will be well to pay attention to that trend.
Yeah, the nostalgia trend is really real. And I think when you unpack that and you think about what it's solving for and what the opportunities are for marketers, really interesting. So first of all, 80s and 90s fashion is back, which is incredible and terrifying at the same time.
Especially when you have 10 and 12-year-old girls and they look like, you did in the 90s, right?
I just, when I'm being schooled on it by the kids, I'm like, no, I lived through it. Like, I don't have it anymore, but I will teach you about that. I think what we see is a return to almost control or centeredness. You see device-free spaces. Dumb phones are coming back with a vengeance in terms of sales. That's a very fascinating trend. The social declines is great. And even things like the kind of quixotic nature of things like cassette tapes or 8
yeah. My daughter asked for a point and shoot digital camera for Christmas this year, which I thought was wild.
I just learned about a great one that's the Polaroid camera, which is point and shoot, but they've merged it so that you can choose your image and then click print if it's one you want. And
oh, that's smart.
I got into a debate with our head of analytics, Henry, about this because I said, I think part of the novelty is when it comes out that you don't know what it's going to look like. So if I get to choose, I take away the novelty of kind of that nostalgic moment. It's gone.
I think that's smart. I think that's a smart insight.
So there is something to be said about that, I think, and it's not like a revolt to AI. I think it's a centeredness that people are hungry for and kind of that sense of, being versus just a human doing. You mentioned the 5 hours of additional efficiency or the 5 hours that people get back. There's increasing evidence that that downtime, or let's say even those more basic tasks, provide time for our brain to come up with better ideas, to connect strategic dots. So you're doing something, but your brain is doing something else at the same time while it processes information. I don't know if we're all meant to be at the highest level of strategic operating capacity at all minutes and hours of the day. And so when you offshore or offload that to AI, how does strategic thought form in a way that's meaningful for clients?
Yeah, that's really interesting. People keep saying that AI is going to make us dumber, but when it gives you time back and white space in your life to actually slow down and smell the roses, as it were, maybe it does make you more creative. It does make you more strategic because you have this white space to actually, go on a walk and think, or maybe even, play the tuba and have the creative flow with whatever, hobby you like that is something that activates your creative side of your brain. So I think that's a good insight too. You mentioned retail. Have we hit peak retail media with every possible, retailer or person who is sitting on retail or some type of sales data, creating their own retail media network? Are we back to 1999 when the internet started and we were trying to figure out how to get all these publishers into the programmatic advertising space? Are we reaching an inflection point with retail media networks that are similar to that? Or will we find uniformity to be able to kind of tap into them all in a way that is simple and universally understandable for brands?
Wouldn't that be great? Simple and universally understandable. Yes, please, more of that. I don't think we're peak yet. I do think the exponential growth there has been crazy. I worry more about the ubiquity of it all and the consumer experience and how do brands stand out. So I think there's more room potentially for retail media network innovation and how does it come to life in that regard? Because otherwise it's just going to be a big pool of inventory. So it makes sense, right? It's obviously a cash cow and another touch point. But in that same regard, I think its effectiveness will continue to be in question as that pool grows.
Interesting. All right. So there's a lot of agencies out there, lots of mid-sized, lots of agencies within holdcos, a lot of challenger agencies. If you could talk to a marketer who's watching right now and tell them the way that you think KSM is different than the sea of other agencies out there, what would be the thing that you would want to express to them the most?
We recently had a pitch and we won that pitch and it was fantastic. And one of the ways we won it and what was commented on by the client direct was such a compliment, which was at every touch point, they could tell that they mattered, that we were in their business, not just on the business, and that we were actually listening. And I think that differentiator and what you're asking about is something that comes up time and time again, but it's such a hard thing in a world of technology and data and, gizmos, smoke, mirrors, widgets, apps, which is the ROI of relationships. It very much so has direct and indirect ROI. Every agency will say our people are different. We have the best people. I think it really gets down to what makes your people the best people. So our people love media. Our people are brass tacks and fully immersed in the business. They 120% believe that clients' growth is our growth, and they act on that with every single decision. And you see that come to life. And when I talk to prospective clients and even current clients, they talk about this, but no one can put relationships or people as an SOW line item, right? They want the product. They want the 32 widgets or the master platform, but all of that fails if you and I can't have a great conversation about what's working and what's not. All of it fails if we're just going through the motions and kind of phoning it in, if you will. And one of the things that makes us so different is that concept of relationships have ROI. Of course, outcomes matter. You can have a great relationship and terrible outcomes and still get fired. But I think it's much harder to have great outcomes if you don't have the relationships that bring it to life.
I love that. Well, what I love about it more is that you answered that question with a story about a recent win. So great job there. And I think, relationships maybe have a harder time to be measured, but I think as AI continues to free us up to do things that are more human, I think the impact on relationships will come more and more measurable. And, the reality is, the relationship with your agency is a sticky one, and it's a relationship that you spend a lot of time on. And if you don't love the people that you have to interact with every single day, then that's going to be a really bad situation, no matter how good the outcomes are or how good the measurable, parts of the relationship can be. So I love that. And it makes me feel really great as a business development person that, AI probably isn't going to buy you a steak dinner or take you to a Laker game anytime soon. So thanks for.
It's funny you mentioned the Laker game. I took my son this weekend to Des Moines to the Casey Center.
Oh, let's go.
Because they had a rodeo, and somehow I'm raising an urban cowboy. I'm not really sure how this is working, but he's into it.
That's wild.
And the client was so awesome. She knew I was in town, and she goes, "Hey, I'd love to have breakfast with you and your kiddo if you guys are around on Sunday." And we weren't able to do it. Her husband ended up being sick, but to me, that is exactly what I would expect and would want from that relationship. I mean, it's not just caring about being at the Casey Center or the bottom line, and that nuance and that integration between us, it makes a world of difference. And I was I told her, I was like, you have no idea how much that invite meant to me. And I think that's the kind of relationships that foster into business growth as well.
Yeah, I love that. I had an agency leader tell me recently that the 1 hour call that you have with your agency every week better be the best hour of your week and the hour that you look forward to. And I think we, in some ways, have lost track of of that North Star. So I think this was a great conversation to realign around that. Well, Chad, if folks are watching and they want to learn more about KSM or connect with you directly, where would you like to send folks?
Yeah, they can absolutely reach out to info@ksmmedia.com. We'll respond very quick. Engagement responsiveness is fast. Or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat with them there as well.
Love it. And for those of you who might be watching the show for the first time, don't forget to give us a subscribe or a follow wherever you happen to be watching. If you're listening, a honest review on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening to the show is how we find a larger audience organically. And if there's somebody out there in agency land or a brand marketer or somebody who you think would just benefit from the conversation that I had with Chad today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, Chad, I will wish you a great week. We'll hopefully have the opportunity to run into each other sometime in the future. Thanks for coming on.
You bet, Dylan. Take care. Thank you.